Tired of saying the same thing over and over and having to yell to get your kids to listen to you? Today we've got you covered. Welcome to Empowered Kids TV Village Talk. This is the place that you come to because you know that every family has the potential to be great, and you're willing to push the boundaries of your mindset so that you can create the family of your dreams. Today, we're answering a really important but popular question. This question comes from Sharon, and Sharon writes, I need help to get through to my kids. I find myself saying the same things over and over. I feel like I do a good job of explaining why they can't do things, like why we don't hit and why we need to tidy up. But my kids, age 7 and 9, still don't listen, and I end up yelling. Can you help me work out how we can get through this and how I can get through to them so that we are not stuck in this cycle? I am losing my mind. Well, today, to help us answer this question, we have an amazing educational psychologist joining us. Dr. Linda Mallory has worked in education for 30 years as a teacher, a reading recovery teacher, a special needs coordinator, and an educational psychologist. She has broad and inclusive understanding of the education system and uses positive psychology approaches in schools to reduce anxiety and facilitate emotional well-being. Linda combined her love of psychology and education and founded the Positive Psychology for Education and the Why Parent, where she provides non-judgmental consultation work in school settings to support the well-being of children, school staff, and parents. She's a speaker, a trainer, and an author of parentuality, how to have an amazing relationship with your child. Linda helps parents have a calm, connected, and conscious approach to parenting. She also developed the emotional well-being program in schools called FELT. So please help me to welcome Linda. Linda, welcome to Village Talk.
Hi. Thank you so much for allowing me to be in this space, because it's such an important thing to think about, is how we talk to our children, how we nurture our children. So thank you.
Absolutely. And it's my pleasure to have you on. Now, this is a question that I think a lot of us as parents, we have been there. We can all put our hands up, right? We're saying the same things over and over until we find ourselves yelling. And because our kids seem to react when we yell, we feel like the yelling was effective. So can we help kind of break down what's happening here, and as parents, what we should be doing to get through to our kids?
Yeah, I've been there myself. My children have probably described me as moody, shouty mummy. So I totally understand how Sharon feels. We've all been there, where we've said something over and over again and we're not getting the result that we were kind of expecting. And it's a bit like, is it Einstein said that, you know, if you're doing the same thing over and over again, expecting a different result, it's not happening. So it's unpacking what that's really all about, isn't it? If we're having to say the same thing over and over again, that concept of we're not getting through is interesting, isn't it? It's, well, if you're on the receiving end of that, you're hearing the same message over and over again. What would you believe about yourself if you're hearing the same thing? And I kind of look at it as in any relationship, because it's all about relationships, isn't it? Absolutely. If we're saying the same thing over and over again to our partner or a friend, and we're not being heard, then what are we going to believe about ourselves? And I think that's a really interesting thing to think about. How does that feel? And really feel that, because I think we need to acknowledge that, yeah, it's frustrating, isn't it? If we see the same thing over and over again, where's the frustration coming from? Is it the fact that we're not being heard? And I'm wondering what our children are also feeling as a result of that, because they must pick up our energy of I'm not being understood. And actually acknowledging that is important, isn't it? That we talk about what we're thinking, what we're feeling, and what we're needing. And I think if we use that, we're modeling to our children that when we say something over and over again, this is what I'm thinking. I'm thinking, this is a little bit annoying. I'm feeling a little bit frustrated. I'm needing this to happen. And I think it's just being honest and open with what we're thinking and feeling and needing. And if we model that, our children realize that actually that's we're human. we also have thoughts, feelings and needs. What Sharon was saying was, we explain why we might need to tidy up. It's just about the language that we use about that. If we're saying, oh, you should be tidying up your toys, you always leave your toys on the floor, that's very disempowering. And it's language of judgment. And our children pick up that language of judgment and feel, I'm going to shut down. Why would I listen to somebody that I kind of feel judged? You know, if you're going to work and somebody says, well, you should have got that on my desk by 5 o'clock, we feel we're not good enough or we're not capable, and it feels the language of judgment. So noticing the language that we use is really, really important. So what I use with positive psychology is, instead of some trigger words like should, could, can't, stop, never, always, it is actually thinking about the energy behind those words lead to shame and guilt. So using positive language, just a little tweak in our language can have a massive impact on the power of our children listening to us. If we're constantly say, you know, you always leave your clothes on the floor, you never put them in the laundry, then they're going to think, well, why should I do that? Or if I always do it, I might as well carry on leaving my clothes on the floor because I feel judged. So I might as well do it. I'm labeled as one of those people that are not tidy, and they live up to that label. So negative language takes twice as long to process in our brains than positive language. So it makes sense, doesn't it? If we try and just tweak our language, reframe it, even the odd word could make a massive difference. So no wonder we get tired and emotional if we're carrying on saying the same thing over again and expecting a different result. We need to be more considered and reflective in the language that we use. And I've had to do that. That's my journey, that I've learned more as a parent from positive psychology by noticing the tweaks in the language can have a profound impact on how our children listen. So just using very collaborative language like let's, or I'm wondering, I'm noticing, without the judgment, can have the impact of children being able to listen to what we're saying rather than feeling like they're being directed or being micromanaged, because nobody likes being micromanaged. You know, we need to feel we've got some kind of control and autonomy over our lives. That's what I kind of notice with the journey I've had to have with, you know, my now teenage sons, that they need to be empowered to see the value of picking up their clothes or doing their homework or self-managing their time on a computer. That me telling them to stop or to not make their room a mess and carry on to saying the same thing and it's not having an impact, I have to think, well, why am I saying that? It's boring to listen to. It then becomes background noise. And people tune out. If you've got a friend that says the same thing over and over again to you, you tune out, don't you? Why? What's the incentive to listen?
Here's what I love about what you're saying, Linda. There's a few things. I love that you're saying parents get to acknowledge their own feelings.
Yeah.
So don't deny that you feel frustrated, because it is frustrating to have to say the same thing over and over. Be honest about that, how you feel and what you need as part of the relationship. And I think sometimes, especially as mothers, we can forget that our needs are also important. Even though we get resentful on the inside, we don't really voice what we need. So I think that's a really important point. And I love the discussion around using positive language rather than negative language. And for me, what I like parents to take away when we talk about how you use language is, does it create safety or defensiveness within the child? Yeah, because once I feel defensive, you've lost me. Now I'm just like kind of zoned out, and I'm listening because I have to listen. I don't have a choice. I'm not in there in the relationship. I'm not engaged. I'm not trying to see how can I help you meet your need, because I've shut down, because all I can do now is think about how do I protect myself because I feel defensive. And so I love that you were able to call out some of those words, because sometimes as parents, we don't feel them in the same way they land as when we say them. So like when we say you should do that, and I've asked you 100 times, like we don't recognize the way it lands for a child when we say it, because we're so wrapped up in our own frustration. So I love that you're saying that for us. There is one thing that I'd like to also share, and maybe you'd also pick up and talk a little bit on it. But I think for a lot of parents, it's important to recognize that when you get to the point of yelling because you're annoyed or frustrated, or even if you've gone to full-blown anger, that's really about what's on the inside of you. As much as we would like to say it's our kids' behavior causing us to feel that way, the truth is, Dr. Wayne Dyer used to say, when life squeezes you, what comes out is only what was on the inside. So if frustration comes out and anger comes out or sadness comes out, that's really because what you had on the inside. And so it takes a bit of work to kind of go back and see what's really at the root of that frustration. And I remember when I did this for myself, like I thought my kids, I used to label it as my kids were ignoring me, right? And that every time I had like the slightest notion my kids were ignoring me, I could feel the heat kind of rise inside of me. And I had to do work on that. And I when I did the inner work on that, I realized that feeling went all the way back to my own childhood wounds. And when I was able to clean that, I didn't see my kids as ignoring me anymore. Now I saw them as engrossed in what they were doing. So they were engrossed in their game, or they were engrossed in their TV show. And it made it easier for me to approach them and talk about the problem as a team and how do we work things out.
And that's a really interesting one. It's we externalize our feelings, don't we? We think that it's because our kids are ignoring us that we're feeling that. Well, we're not feeling that. We're feeling the thoughts around our kids and are ignoring us. It's not a reality, because their needs are playfulness. They need to feel understood and listened to. It's about their need being met at that moment in time, isn't it? And is it the reality? Is it true that they're ignoring you? Or it's just that they have a need at that moment in time to do, as you say, they're engrossed. They're doing what they need to do at that moment in time. But we judge that moment in time as they're ignoring us. But it's actually testing it out, isn't it? By, is it true they're ignoring us?
I love it. And I think when we can get to that stage as parents, for me especially, it was the bridge to teamwork. It was because it changed the dynamic from us being on opposite sides, fighting with each other over picking up the clothes and doing the chores and doing the homework. Instead, we were on the same side now. We were one team, and we put the problem on the other side. So as a team, how do we make sure our space is tidy? And why was that important for all of us? And so that was a very different energetic space and a different conversation as that you are not listening to me.
Yes, because it's important to you, but it might not be important to them. They might not value
absolutely
tidiness. Yeah. And I had that moment as well when having that conversation. Well, what makes a good parent? And one of my children said, you know, somebody that's honest and truthful, and the other one said somebody that tickles. It's the completely different values, and so you can understand somebody that's in that moment of liking that physical contact and rough and tumble. For them, physical contact and hugs and playfulness is important to them. So keeping going on at them about tidying up or doing something that they feel is not important to them, it's acknowledging to them, isn't it, that I can see that's important to you, and valuing it, acknowledging it. This is what I'm thinking, this is what I'm feeling, this is what I'm needing. If they're able to then articulate what they're needing, I just need to finish this Lego model that I'm making. I just need to finish off listening to this piece of music. And you know, if we're talking about those thoughts, feelings, needs, then we are being a team, aren't we? We're being collaborative and cooperative because we're sharing the same space and acknowledging that we're being compassionate about what our thoughts and feelings and needs are.
Here's what I love about that, Linda. I think by doing that, we model what it looks like to value each other's needs. So if I value my kids' needs, they then learn to value my needs. So when I come back and I say, you know what, I really need a tidy space. And I have two boys. They really don't care about how tidy it is until they can't find something, right? So,
I feel the same, yeah.
so it's not high on their value list. But because I've worked to honor the things that they need, it's easy to then come to the table to say, this is what I need. How can you help me meet this need? And then you can work together.
Amazing. And
okay,
has the energy changed in the dynamic of the family because of that?
Absolutely. So our family, we started in a very, very disconnected place. And over time, working on being a more present and conscious parent, working to really put connection first before I asked for what I needed, and to treat my kids with the same level of respect and honor that I would want for myself and that I would give to another adult. That changed the entire dynamic for us. And so now we do find it easier, not always, it's definitely not 100%, but we do find it easier to stand on the same side and put the challenge opposite us and tackle it together, as opposed to the loggerheads that we found ourselves in the past.
Yeah. And I guess it goes back to Sharon's original question, doesn't it? Why can't I get through is a really interesting one, isn't it? Because the why, you're on the back foot straight away, aren't you? That why am I getting this wrong? Instead of actually thinking, where are the moments when we do communicate effectively? When are the times that actually we are conscious? But as parents, sometimes we just focus on the things when we're not getting through, don't we? We think that it's that, what would you call that, confirmation bias, where you're constantly checking to see whether you're confirming my belief that I'm a bad parent, my children are not listening to me, instead of actually noticing those times when they are listening and they are having that dialogue with us. But we naturally, as human beings, and particularly as parents, just focus on the things that are not going so brilliantly. And I think I would just encourage anybody to just reflect on those moments when they do listen. It's impossible to go through a whole day with our children not listening to us.
I love that. I think it's important for us to recognize that if we focus on when it works and kind of map out what about this made it work, we can repeat that. So I think we've given some really great tips for Sharon, and I'd just like to recap some of them. So the first tip was feel the truth of what it may feel like to say and to hear the same things over and over so you understand each other's experience. Then we talked about being honest. Be honest about what you think, how you feel, and what you need so that your kids are really open to understanding. And then notice the language that you use when you make a request. Try to swap your negative language for more empowering, positive language. And we need to heal rather than externalize our feelings. So when we feel annoyed or we feel frustrated because we're in that spiral of doing the same thing over and over, recognize those emotions as our own rather than giving the onus to our kids to make us feel better, which I love. And the last tip was to reflect on when they do listen. When does it work right? Find out what you had within that scenario and then try to replicate that rather than focusing on all of the times when it doesn't work, because then you're focusing your energy in all of the wrong spaces. Is there anything else you'd like to add for us today, Linda?
I think being compassionate with ourselves is so important that it's okay. I mean, I see a lot of children when I go into schools, and a lot of the beliefs that they have about themselves: I'm not lovable, I'm not enough, I'm not good enough, I'm not capable, I'm not doing it right, I get everything wrong, nobody's listening to me, actually is a common one. We need to be compassionate with ourselves so we can be compassionate with our children. And if we're compassionate with ourselves, we turn up energetically to being compassionate with our children. But just, as I say, really focusing on what the need is and communicating that is just really, really helpful for any relationship, but particularly with our children, because I'm seeing children growing up not knowing what they need. And actually, when you ask them what do they need, they're finding it difficult to articulate because they're shut off from their emotions and their thinking, because it's a way of preserving themselves, because they don't want to look silly in front of their friends, or they don't want to make a mistake. But what if there were no mistakes? What if there were no right or wrong? What if there was just being?
Oh, that's so beautiful. And that's so beautiful, and an amazing place for us to wrap up this episode of Village Talk. Thank you so much for joining us today and helping with this question.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for the opportunity.
No problem. Thank you for joining us for this episode. We're all about sharing and supporting this village. So if you found value in this episode, be sure to share it with your family and friends. And remember, this is a weekly show. So if you haven't already, subscribe and hit that bell icon so that you'll be notified of our next episode. As we always say in the village, you're just one connection away. With love and gratitude, empower us. Until next time.